In this video, we're going to look at the Run 8 train simulator, how to simulate real railroad operations using that simulator. Most of my videos have focused on model railroads, but there's a lot of other ways you can operate. One of the things that makes this a great simulator for model railroad operations is that it's very prototypical and there are multiple people running multiple trains all at the same time. You can interact with other players, other engineers, you can have your own conductor, you can even have dispatchers and speak to one another either with text or with headsets using a program like TeamSpeak, which is free. So I thought I would show how to run a local from Victorville, California to Hesperia, California, and we're going to do that now. We need to turn on various circuit breakers and functions. This isn't really a full tutorial on how to start a locomotive or to run in Run 8. You can get those on other video channels. This is more about the experience of operating and how it parallels real railroad operations. First, we've got to put our engine run switch in start, and then we press the starter button to get the diesel locomotive moving, and we'll get the engine to come up to speed and be ready to go. We put it in run now because we finished starting the locomotive. We're going to go to what's called the Operations Center, or OC, which is a website that is hosted by the Run 8 Depot. On it there are lots and lots of trains to choose from, and we've picked El Cal 0101, the Hesperia local. We have to click the button that says Crew Local. That puts us, Steve SGD, there on the crew so that nobody else can claim that local, because again, this is a multiplayer game and lots of people might be running at the same time. We're going to take a look at the map to see where it is we've got to work. We're starting on the bottom left there in Victorville, California, and we're going to run to the upper right, Hesperia, California, and switch the various industries that you see there. We're in West Victorville right now. We're actually on the bottom track. You can't see us because we're not on the CTC controlled territory. We're going to have to set the signal to red to prevent opposing traffic from running into us. If we had a live dispatcher on duty, we need to call that dispatcher and ask their authority to actually do this, but there isn't a live dispatcher right now, so we are doing this ourselves. BNSF 7550, leader on the El Cal 101 Hesperia local, opening up a switch between CP Frost and CP Victorville. BNSF 7550 out. You can see there's lots of other trains on the territory. This shows where they all are, shows the locomotive, lead locomotive number, and the speed that they're running and the direction they're going. So the BNSF 9245 28 west means it's BNSF 9245 in the lead, running at 28 miles per hour headed westbound. Helps us to keep track of the other traffic when we're self-dispatching like we are today. Again, when it gets busier on the territory, people will come on and volunteer to dispatch, which adds yet another dimension and interest to the game. Now that we've notified the trains, we're going to open up this switch on main 2. We're going to walk over here physically and throw the switch just like you would on the prototype. We've thrown the switch so that we can enter the main line. We're going to go ahead and make our move. I use a rail driver to operate my locomotive. It's something you can order from a place called raildriver.com, believe it or not. And I love it. Makes a much more prototypical feel. You can operate the locomotive with a control stand similar to what you would use in some of the modern desktop style controllers. We can choose what's displayed at the top of the screen. Right now we're looking at the coupler pressure and train speed. It's about keeping it under 15 miles an hour because we're in yard limits. Walking over to the switch here, getting ready to throw it after our train clears. Shows here that we're in throttle notch 1. Sometimes when you're using the rail driver, it's hard to tell exactly which notch you're in. So it kind of helps to have that screen up there, but that's totally up to you. You also can turn all of that off and not have anything displayed at the top of the screen if that's your preference. We're applying the independent brake now, and so you see the brake cylinder pressure going up as we stop our train. We've only got 2 cars, so we're just using the locomotive brakes. Throwing the switch, and we're going to get on the car and ride back to the join. That's another thing I like about this Run 8 train simulator. It's a lot like real life because you have to get on and off and walk to your cars. You don't just reach over and grab a car like you would with a model railroad. Here I'm speaking with another player, but I'm doing it by typing in text. I'm not really very good at typing and also operating my rail driver, as you can see, so I almost get going a little too fast there, but we will get the speed under control before. Yeah, we threw on some brake. And it's quite a grade here, actually. We're heading downgrade as we back up, or upgrade as we move forward. We are beginning to get into Cajon Pass area, and while we're still a ways from the pass, it is not flat here by any means, and you have to manage your train accordingly. And again, that adds some challenge that you don't always have with a model railroad. Want a couple at under 3 miles an hour if we can, and looks like we're running about 2.1. We're going to be okay. There we are, all good. Blow the horn once to signal that we are set and centered, so our brakeman or conductor know that it's safe to go between. Before we connect our hoses, though, we want to get to the back of the train and make sure that the angle cock at the rear is actually closed. We don't know how the previous crew left this train, and that's another thing that's realistic about this simulator. It's what you might call state aware. However people left the train last time, that's how we're going to find it this time. Kind of a long walk back to that train, and again, unlike a model railroad, you don't necessarily just fly around, and gives you more of a feel of the pace of railroading, which is not fast. You kind of things take time. You're moving heavy equipment. Almost to the end of the train here. Taking a look at the rear, it looks like the previous crew put a Fred on for us already, and we're looking top right. You'll see it said closed. The angle cock is closed, which means if we apply air, we're not going to go into emergency. We did notice that with these 2 locomotives in this short train, we've got too much horsepower per ton, about 6.7. So we're going to isolate the second locomotive. It looks red like that. That just means we've selected it in the game. That's one of those gamey functions that, aren't quite prototypical, but you do need a way to know which locomotive it is you're working on. Now that we've isolated it, we're down to 3.3 horsepower per ton, and that helps us manage our train. Now, those not familiar with this might ask, well, why would you want to do that? More power is better, right? Well, not necessarily, because if you have too much power, I just turned the cab light off there, you notice, you might pull your train apart, break a knuckle, pull a coupler, things like that. So, and those things do happen in this simulator, so you do need to be careful about managing your slack, managing your train, the amount of torque, all of those kinds of things. Looking at our EOT device comes on, and you hear the beep also, and it tells us that the last car on the train is moving. With a long train, that's very important. You don't want to notch out your throttle before the last car is moving, or again, you could pull it apart. The bluish dot on the dispatch screen shows that we have hand operated a switch, and you also see our train designator, BNSF 7550, showing that we are now occupying the main line. We're counting down our footage. I pushed a button on the rail driver to start that countdown, and that's how the engineer in a train without a caboose like we operate today would know that they have completely cleared the yard. It's going to count down to 0. When it does, we're out of the yard. We're on the main line then, and then our conductor or switchman will have to line the switch for normal mainline movement, and will notify the rest of the territory or the dispatcher if there were one. Here we're changing different display screens. You notice we've got 2 computer monitor displays, and they are realistic. You can change what you see on them, you can interact with them, you can set slow speeds for unloading coal, etc. Different things you can look at. Our speed limit in the yard is 15 miles an hour, so while we do all that, we also want to make sure that we don't exceed 15 miles an hour, or we could run a switch or something since the track isn't rated for more than that. We've got about 70, 60, 50, 40, feet left. As you see, when it reaches 0, we're going to be out of the yard. We put our brakes on. I was probably a little slow to do that. Too busy talking and shooting the video. Here I am now walking over to the switch. I'm going to throw the switch. Now, those of you who are real sticklers know that that conductor needs to walk all the way back to the locomotive, or we'd have to do what's called a Rule 6.6 move and back up and let him on the locomotive. I cheat a little bit and edit the video so that you can see us right here in the cab and don't wait through all that.
BNSF 7550 West reports all switches hand operated between Frost and Victorville. Restored to normal operating positions, crossing over from main 2 to main 1 for a westbound move. BNSF 7550 out.
Notice that the crossing bell light is lit on the bottom. Inside the cab it can be pretty quiet and you don't always hear the bell. There are 8 notches on most US diesels, and we're running on throttle notch 4 right now, so we're not flat out. Again, we don't want to pull apart the train. We want to keep constant acceleration. We're looking at the speedometer there, and we're looking at the ammeter and how many amps are we pulling. You'll notice there's a green and a white arrow. The white arrow shows us our actual speed, and it's also digitally presented down there, 17 miles an hour. And the green arrow shows us what's called our target speed, or at the current throttle setting, what is the speed going to be if we continue at this throttle setting.
BNSF 7550 West on main 2 has a diverging clear over to main 1, 7550 West out.
A diverging clear signal means we're going to take the diverging path crossing over, but we have a clear aspect, meaning we can proceed at track speed as soon as our train has cleared the switch and complied with any speed limit associated with that switch. We're going to stack the crossover. What that means is we will set the signals and line the switches even though our train is still crossing through the crossover. As soon as we clear, the switches will be thrown and the signal set automatically for the BNSF 7765 East, who is proceeding east at 57 miles an hour. So he's not prepared to stop. The tracks separate here for a flyover. It enables the 2 lines to cross so that eastbound traffic, which has to climb the grade, can take the least steep grade, and westbound traffic, which will be heading downhill, can take the steeper grade and return to right-hand running after that. You can see now that we've crossed over. We can go back to track speed, and we're on the flyover. We'll take a look out the cab window to the right so we can see the track we're about to cross over. Having a cup of coffee this morning. Hey, it's early. That train hasn't arrived yet, or we'd see him on the lower track, but we will pass that train as we continue west towards Hesperia.
User joined your channel.
Hey Diesel, I wanted to thank you for finishing up that Cajon local. Gave me the Hesperia to run today. Sorry I didn't get it done yesterday, I just ran out of time.
Yeah, you should have seen how heavy that thing was on the return trip.
Yeah, I was actually looking forward to running it because I saw there was a whole bunch of pickups, and then I ended up needing to go to dinner, and I came back home wondering if I could still run it, but it had been run, which is great. I mean, that's what the cool thing about this simulator is, like real world. People take on other jobs, dog catch crews come on board, the work gets done.
Yeah, it was 1 HPT.
Oh my! At least you weren't going through the summit.
Yeah, it ended up not being a big deal at all because it was much all downhill.
Parts of the run like this, which are fairly straight and uneventful, I've thought about speeding up. You can leave a comment in the video if you'd rather I time-lapsed or sped up these runs. But one thing I like about them is, unlike a model railroad where your towns are generally pretty close together, you do get the feeling of really crossing some ground. And the distances are what they really are. So if it's a 10-mile run from Victorville to Hesperia, then it is 10 miles that you need to run on your train, which again I sort of like. I'm getting ready to pass the other train, and you'll see him soon on the other track, which is now Main 1. We're running westbound on Main 2. Taking a look at our route map and checking where we are. We've just crossed over the crossover at CP Frost. We'll be coming up on a detector soon by Thorn, and then we're going to come to Hesperia at milepost 45.1 where we'll do our work. Notching all the way out to run 8, we're heading up the grade and we need all the power we can get. To our right is Thorn, which is another industrial area that's serviced by a different local, which you can also, of course, run. You can see a milepost marker up ahead. That's optional. You can turn those on if they help you find out where you are on the map, or turn them off. Of course, again, not prototypical, but if you were running in a real prototype locomotive, you'd have the employee timetable, you'd know what all the upcoming mileposts were, and you'd have a little better situational awareness. And this is for those who are getting a map out and trying to figure out the route, or layout if you will. I can see the headlight of the opposing train now. I'm going to turn my headlight down to dim so that we don't blind the opposing traffic. He's got his headlight on dim as well. We'll turn it back up. Looks like we got a stacked train there on Main 1 heading eastbound. There's our pass. You can see the 7766 going 40 miles an hour with us going 27 miles an hour on the opposing track. Yet another thing that's cool about these train simulators, as opposed to some model railroads, not all, is that you can run prototypical length trains. It's not uncommon to see 60, 70, 80, 100 car, even 110 car trains. The limits are only what the prototype would limit you to, and the amount of horsepower you have and the amount of tonnage you have. You do have to be careful if you put too many locomotives on the front of a train and create some kind of long, heavy train, maybe a 10,000 footer. You can pull that train apart. So you need to think about distributed power, or DPU, either mid-train or here on the end of the train, to take up the slack and make sure there's not too much strain on the couplers behind the locomotive. Going to take a look at our train from a rail fan's point of view, what it would look like if we were passing by. Pushing a button on the rail driver puts me back in cab view. Up at the top you can see the track speed is actually 50 miles per hour for freight trains. We're only doing 24, and that's at full throttle. Maybe starting to regret the fact that I isolated that second locomotive. We could probably make better speed. But you do then need to be careful that you accelerate very gradually so as, again, not to pull apart your train or bust a knuckle. And those things will happen in this simulator, and the train will go into emergency, and you have to reconnect and refill the air, and it can take a while. With a long train, it could take 20 minutes. With our little local, it would probably only take a few minutes. Looks like we're about to pass another train, the BNSF 9150, who's also going 50 miles an hour. He's heading down grade, and he's on Main 1. The automatic block signal on Main 1 to our right shows an approach aspect because an approaching train is in the next block. Our signal is clear or green because there is no train ahead of us in our block on Main 2. Signaling is modeled prototypically in Run 8. And in fact, it's different for these western territories like the Southern California Cajon sub that we're running on today, and the eastern territories like CSX's A-Line or the Selkirk division, which are also available in Run 8. They use a completely different signaling system. You can learn more about the signaling system used on the Run 8 website, the depot website, or even prototype signaling websites, because they do follow actual prototype practice. Trying to notch that throttle out still further, but I don't think it goes anywhere beyond Run 8. And like I said before, if you'd like to see me fast forward through portions of the route like this, just drop a comment on the video, and next one I shoot I'll go ahead and do that. I'll accelerate this, but I kind of like running the route. It's only 10 miles, but we're not running 60 miles an hour, so at 30 miles an hour, 10 miles is 20 minutes. Off to our left is the entry into the Hesperia working area, or the town of Hesperia. We're not going to take this switch to enter because we want to back in order to do our switching, which is going to be trailing point moves on the other end of the siding. That's our decision. We could have gone on into the branch. Also, you want to know for sure that this is clear. Sometimes there's a coal train parked on this exit or this spur to our left, and you'd want to find that out first. We're seeing our opposing traffic coming our way. I can see his headlight. You see me turning the switch to dim my headlight. This train is being operated by the engineer I was speaking with earlier, and so as a friendly greeting he blew his horn at me as he passed, and of course I reciprocated.
BNS 9159, try and look good there. Have a safe trip.
You can start seeing the town of Hesperia now. Some vehicle traffic to our right, and we are slowing down in preparation to stop and begin to do our work in Hesperia. We're going to trigger our countdown timer so that we know when our entire train has passed this switch. Again, no caboose on the back of this train, so that's the only way to really know, unless we stopped and let a conductor out here, which actually we might do since he needs to throw the switch. So if I were really operating prototypically, I would probably stop here, let my conductor or switchman out, and then he could watch the tail of the train. Here we are at Hesperia, counting down. And now, push the button on the rail driver to start that. Now, all the things you see me doing on the rail driver, you can do with a keyboard. You don't have to have a rail driver to do all of this. It just makes it feel more like running an actual train. We're down to 10 miles an hour now. I'm taking a quick look around the cab. still an uphill climb, so we don't really need to put on any brakes. We're just slowing the train down to 20 feet, and we should stop here. We should be able to stop fairly quickly. We're using the train brake now as well as the independent brake, and it looks like we overshot the mark a little bit. I probably should have began my deceleration a little sooner. And EOT move came on because it's still rolling, but then it came off as the train came to a stop. We've gotten out, making sure that everything is clear. We're going to get on the safe side of the tracks, get away from any opposing traffic, and our poor conductor is going to walk to the end of the train, which of course we've fast forwarded that. There's actually a button you can push in the simulator that jumps you right to the end of the train, so it's up to you how prototypical you want to be. You have that control. You could do it more like a model railroad. You can jump around a little bit. You can really walk to every single switch and throw it. It's really up to you. Walking to the switches and throwing them so that we can now leave the main line and get into the spur and start our work. We don't have very much of a lead here though, so we are going to have to pull onto the main a couple of times while we make our switching moves. Three blasts of the horn indicate that we're going to make a reverse move. The bell is triggered automatically on these modern ES44 locomotives. Some do that, some don't, so I had to turn the bell off. You saw me push the button on the rail driver to do that. Now we're relying more on the brake than the throttle because we are pushing down grade and we're gaining speed fairly quickly. Throttle notch 0, as you can see. Applying some independent brake and some train brake. Keep our speed manageable as we pull into this siding, or actually spur. You can see some cars waiting in this industry, or there's actually two industries here that we're going to have to switch out. If you're running with two people, which you can do, then we could have an engineer sitting in the front cab, and he could see when the front of the train had cleared the main, and the conductor could be riding on the back. I plan to shoot a future video that demonstrates that. Now we're jumping to the cab position, and we can see that we are clearing the main. Putting on our brakes as we continue to head down grade, and the train slows gradually to a stop. After we come to a stop in the siding here at Hesperia, we take a look at our work order on the OC at the depot and see where we have work. We've got pickups and setouts at OMY, but only deliveries at HWL, Hesperia Wholesale Lumber. Looks like we didn't shove our cut back quite far enough. Our locomotives won't clear when we push back to do our work. So we're going to push back a little further to make sure we've got plenty of clearance. That ought to do. We'll take it to a stop and apply the air brakes. We want the train brake on as well because we're going to bottle up the air to keep the train from rolling. Remember, we are on a bit of a grade, so we're putting the hand brakes on, which is always the best thing to do. But also we're going to leave the air on the air brakes even after we disconnect. Close that angle cock so the air can't get out. We know the rear angle cock is closed. Close the locomotive angle cock so that we don't get a big hole when we pull apart. But you'll notice we cannot uncouple. The open coupler was yellow. Now it's turned white. When it's yellow, it means we have a strain on the coupler. The pin hasn't dropped. So we push back a little more, the pin drops, and now we can actually uncouple. You'll often hear a conductor say, "Come back for a pin, please." Pulling ahead, getting ready to run around that cut of cars. We've left the mainline switch open. We haven't relinquished our track and time yet, so we're going to go ahead and pull forward onto the main just past that first switch. Looks like we might have stopped a little bit short. We're going to give it just a bit more throttle and get off of the points. That ought to do. Throwing the turnout, you'll see we have traffic behind us, but that traffic is on main 1. It's not interfering with us. We're doing left-hand running before the crossover. So that piggyback train's coming by on main 1. We still have main 2 protected with a red signal because we are occupying the switch. Climb on board our locomotive. We're going to ride with it as we move back towards our work. Reverse move, a few blasts of the horn, 3 means reverse. Turn off that pesky bell, and here we go. In the meantime, our switchman goes back and lines the switch for a normal mainline movement so that train traffic can continue. To slow down a bit. We're coming in at about 7 miles an hour. We need to couple at less than 3, so applying the independent brake. There's no train, so there's really no point in using the train brake anyway. The independent brake just controls the brakes on the locomotive, and it responds much more quickly since there's not a lot of air to build up and a bunch of air hoses, etc. Down to 3.2, 3.1, below 3. It looks like we're going to make a nice join here, and that will do. Alright, center in between, one blast on the horn. We're not going to let the air into this cut yet until we make sure that at the rear of the train the angle cock has been closed. If we did let the air in and the angle cock were open, air would just blow right out and it would put our train in emergency, and we'd get what's called a PCV error, which is a pressure control valve error you get when the pressure drops too quickly in the brake line. Once again, the angle cock is closed, so we don't need to do anything. Releasing the handbrakes, notice it rolled back a little bit. That's how realistic this simulator is. Notice as you release each handbrake, you get a little bit of movement on that car. It's because it's on a slight grade. We accidentally selected the wrong cut of cars there. Now we got the right one. We'll release that handbrake. depends again on what the previous crew did. If they tied all the handbrakes down, then we've got to open them all up. Back in the cab of the locomotive. Taking another check, we're marking off that we picked up the 6 loaded boxcars at OMYA. So that goes off of our list because that pickup has been done. 2 blasts of the horn means starting forward motion. Notice, however, our train is actually rolling back. Now, we had our reverser in the forward direction and we applied throttle, but that's the problem with the grade right there. So we've turned on the sanders. We're going to give it some throttle now. Be careful not to break the coupler, so we'll start nice and slow, and with the help of sand we're able to start those 6 cars moving. Taking notch 3 just to move those cars at 7 miles an hour from a dead stop. So again, you've got to manage your power on this little grade. The yellow EOT error simply means there is no end of train device on the back of this cut, no FRED in other words, so there's an error. It's not communicating with the end of train. Applying the brakes before we re-enter the main line, we've got to contact the dispatcher or at least the train crew and let them know what we're going to do.
7550, opening up the switch on main 2 between CP Lugo and CP Frost for a quick move. BNSF 7550 out. And here we go, walking up to the switch. We're going to open it up. Notice we first checked the dispatcher panel to make sure there was no traffic in the way. We wouldn't want to open up the switch in the face of an oncoming train. Not only could that cause an accident in real life, but on this multiplayer game, whoever was running that other train would be pretty upset with us. Because you do have to deal with real people running real trains in real time. Switch is clear. Pulling forward onto the main just enough to clear the turnout. We had pickups only from OMYA, so now we're going to reconnect to our cut and do our setouts to both of the spurs. Switch is lined for our movement. Back we go. Couple onto our cut. It looks like we've got some opposing traffic coming our way, so we're going to couple onto the cut and then shove into the clear to allow that westbound train to come by on the close main, which is main 2. Do. Set and centered. Bell. BNSF 7802 is heading our way at 31 miles an hour, so we do need to clear up before he gets there. Still a few blocks between us and him. Here we are shoving into the clear. As soon as we get out of the way, we'll line the switch and wait for him to pass. BNSF 7550, all clear of main 2 between Lugo and Frost, ready for a 7802 opposing traffic. 7550 out.
Yeah, that's weird. It wants you to add 2 more center beams to that without picking them up.
Yeah, that's my concern. I guess it can overlap a little bit. I do see under HWL on the OC, it says there are max of 4 and max of 6 and there's 4 cars there. So I could pick them up. I just want to make sure I wasn't, I'm just going to leave them, I guess.
Yeah. I can't say I've seen a situation like that where you're delivering something and it has you leave anything that's there.
I'll post a note on the forum.
The Cajon sub's pretty busy today. Stacked trains passing each other on main 1 and main 2 while I wait off on the spur, trying to get a little more track and time to poke out and finish my switching on this end of Hesperia.
Actually, you know what? Maybe I have encountered that on that same local for that same set of cars.
Okay, and let me know if you have any advice for me. I'm planning on leaving them there because there's no way, I guess I can indicate them as being picked up. So, certainly don't want to cause trouble on the OC.
Yeah, just leave the 2. But I'm pretty sure, I think that same thing happened to me right there, and I just left the 2 new cars and didn't take anything.
Understood, thank you. It'll actually be okay because it'll get us to 6, which is the max. Got the BNSF 7802 West all by me here at Hesperia. Gonna open up switch on main 2 between CP Lugo and CP Frost for a quick poke.
Now, because this signal has a number board on it, it's actually a permissive signal, not an absolute signal, which means I can stop and proceed if I wish to. But since I know there's a train in the block, I am going to wait here until I get a more favorable aspect. And there's an approach, so here I go. Pull on the train. Still couldn't get them rolling without the sanders, so not a long train, but it's heavy enough. And starting upgrade from a dead stop, we needed some sand on the wheels. Still just trying to pull our cut past the switch to couple back onto our remaining cars so we can do our set out. Notice I'm using the counter again. We're counting down now 450 feet. I'll know then when I've passed the switch. Less than 70 feet to go. 40, 30, 20, 10. Putting on the brakes, turning off the throttle to idle. Turn off the sanders. We're at stop. Make sure we did pass it. My conductor throws a switch. And no problem getting up speed going downgrade. In fact, we have to watch our speed. We're almost at the yard speed limit of 15 miles an hour. We're at 13 now. Not too bad. Getting ready to make our set outs at OMY first, and then we'll do HWL. The little lettering you see over those cars shows the destination. I can turn that on or off, so if you don't want to see it, you don't have to. This car is going to Watson, next one's going to Galesburg, next one's going to Pasco, Washington, and KCK is Kansas City, Kansas. So these cars could be picked up. They're empty, and they are due to be outbound. That's why I was curious why the switch list didn't have me picking these cars up. But apparently a later local will do that. All stops set and centered. Put those handbrakes on. There's another train simulator where you actually get to turn the wheel. It's a little more realistic than just clicking. Maybe they'll add that as a later feature, but it's not bad. You get the idea. You get to operate like you would a real train. And if you forget to do it and uncouple, that train could go rolling off into the main line. Got all those boxcar handbrakes on. I'm not going to bother bottling up the air. I'm going to let the air out of the trailing part of the car. Looks like we can't open the coupler. We're going to have to push back a little bit to get what's called a pin. You see how the uncoupler is yellow. So we've closed the angle cock and tell our engineer to come back for a pin. There's the pin. See that it says white where it's open coupler. Now we've clicked it. Now it says uncouple pin open. So we're ready to pull away from our cutter cars. The reason that coupler is red just means I've selected it. It doesn't have any other meaning than that. Getting in position to make sure that my beam cars clear this switch so that I can shove them back into wholesale lumber. I've stopped a little short. Going up grade, sometimes it's easy to do. Doesn't take any brake, just let go of the throttle and you're rolling back. I'm on notch 4 now just to move forward at this crawl here, as you see, 2.5 miles an hour. Stopped them with just the independent brake. No point in using the train brake. It's rolling back on its own weight. You see it do that before it even applied any power. And getting on board to ride the cut back to make my join. If we're running two-man crew, which you can do on this sim, I would be telling my conductor to come back 4 cars to it. Well, in this case it looks like 8 cars to a join, and I would talk them back. I will probably shoot a video like that with a friend of mine who's going to help me switch a local. But you can run these all by yourself or with somebody else or even with a crew of 2 or 3. It's all been done. Need to put that brake on now. Heading down grade. It's 7 mile an hour. We're putting on the independent. A little bit of train brake, looks like. That below 3 miles an hour. We're going to have a rough couple. We made it. Will do. Horn to signify that reverser's centered and the handbrake is, that the brake is set. Applying the handbrakes. That cut takes up the whole spur. Not sure why we didn't pick up those empties. Closing that angle cock, opening the coupler pin. We didn't need to back up this time. We have plenty of slack so the pin could drop. Going ahead and pulling forward with the sanders on. We're in notch 4. Took all that to get it moving. Taking a look at the switch list, and we're signifying that yes, we delivered those 2 cars and we delivered 7 box cars to the other spur. As we check off the list, it's a live website so that the list updates itself in real time. Yardmaster knows what's happened, and you don't have to keep track of it yourself. As you take things off the list, they automatically disappear. Kind of neat. Also, it adds them to your train. Later we'll need to deliver these cars somewhere for another local to pick up. We never released our track in time, so we're going to go ahead and pull onto the main and occupy that. And that'll be our last time we occupy the main line for this part of the world. Conductor's on the ground watching the shove, or I should say watching the pull. Looks like I got 1, 2, 3, 4 cars to go. And if I were operating with a separate engineer, I'd be telling him 3 cars to the switch. 2 now. 1 now. 1. Half a car. And that'll do when you can get them stopped. Climbed on board, we're going to shove back to the remaining cars that are way up that spur. Got a little bit of train brake on, that's the squealing you're hearing, and we're sort of modulating the independent brake to keep the speed under 10 miles an hour. We'll get serious about slowing up here before we bash into those cars that are sitting up the spur. Down below 3 miles an hour, looks like we're going to have a good join. Set and centered, lining the switch for normal mainline movement.
BNSF 5555 reports all switches hand operated between CP Frost and CP Lugal on main 2 restored, lined and locked for normal mainline movement.
In part 2, we'll start working up the branch line and catch the rest of the industries here in Hesperia.